There is no sense of relation between these two cards. I simply chose to put them there. Yep. Anyway, welcome folks. It's been taking a little bit, but we are finally continuing on with the deck profiles for Overdress Set 2. Basically the majority of, all of August, let me just put it bluntly, all of August will be a back and forth between Overdress deck profiles for D-BT02, as we are going to be in this format for a long time, as well as deck and fights for Vanguard 0 and the occasional other content sprinkled in. Also, second channel's been popping pretty hard lately, so make sure you check it out. I've been uploading a fair bit there with stuff that I do on top of Vanguard, such as Digimon TCG, Dragalia Lost, etc, etc. So go give it some love, I do appreciate it. Also, if you like video, leave like. If you like content, leave subscribe. If you like to buy card, go to parkcage.com and buy card using code DifferentFight. Anyway, it is at 10:30 p.m. and therefore my brain is slowly leaking out, and so let's just get into the deck profile real quick and start to talk about our usual stuff. I'll try to keep it as educational as possible as usual, so I'll stop the weird banter from here on out. Of course, if you play Orfist, you're gonna need your Shadow Army tokens. Of course, Raid Shadow Legends, sponsored Raid Shadow Legends Army tokens, so they're very good. Make sure you have them. That's all. That's the only sponsored message, except it's not. Would be funny though. The Ride deck as usual. Nothing has really changed here. It's still the same, you know, goons, the same squad as before. So of course, your Volvi to draw your extra cards going second, your Rutis to search you orders, as well as, well, nothing else, just search orders. Your Cubizia, some people run Cubizia in the main deck as well at 3 of, still for the 15k attacker roll. I personally don't use it for that, but there's definitely space for it, so if you want to run, you can run it. Otherwise, this is just to make better numbers on our turn 2. And of course, Orfist is the main card of the deck, and therefore we'll be focusing on him. But we'll talk about Orfist in a little bit. For now, let's talk about some other stuff first, because this time around I want to start this deck profile with the orders, with the actual set orders, because I think that this is where a lot of the discussion has come down to, and I think it does also depend on what your local meta is, because this does change a fair bit. But the one thing in my opinion that doesn't really change is that you do run this one as a 4-of. So Hallowing Moonlit Night is a very nice order because it is simply on play, you Soul Blast 1, draw a card. Like, there's no denying this. It can't be damage denied. Your opponent can't leave an empty front row. They will have to let you use this. There's no way about it. It's our best order to play when we are damage denied, or when our opponent, like, you know, tries to do something funky to deny us counterblast for our plays, because of course that's one of the main counterplays against Orfist, is just counterblast deny them, right? So this is a really good order at all times. It never hurts to have, whether you have counterblast or you don't, and therefore just cycle cards are always going to be great. So this one is a 4-of in my opinion at all times. Like, I honestly don't see a world where you don't play it. Now the new one has been played in various amounts of copies. So I play 2, and I know people play 4. You can also play 3. I think that's also perfectly fine. The reason why I play 2 is, I guess I'll show the remaining orders that I play as well. It's because I play 2 Darkness That Nobody Knows. Now, why do I play 2 Darkness That Nobody Knows? Well, this is because if your locals has Verena players, and you run into them a fair bit at tournaments, this will be very good. Because, yes, we have Alviderd in this set that gives us the ability to retire stuff at the end of the battle that Alviderd attacked, but that's the thing, it's at the end of the battle. So when your opponent has a Verena Urger on the board, they can still intercept with it. Whereas this will mean that if they have an Urger set up, I can pop it, and then they don't have that meaty intercept anymore. So literally, if your locals has a bunch of Verena players, you play this at higher copies. You can play it as a 1-of and play 3. You could choose to cut it out entirely, play 4 of these. Now, let's focus on Eclipse Moonlight real quick. Eclipse Moonlight, I didn't even say the effect of this, but I think most of you know it. It's Soul Blast 1, retire front row. Like, it's pretty straightforward. So Eclipse Moonlight is the new order in set 2, which says when you play it, you can get almost 1 to call a Shadow Army token. So this is a really good ability because, of course, on turn 2, this allows us to basically make a Shadow Army token, bash with 15. We can boost it with a Bubble Mine to make back the counterblast. We can boost it with a Thumbarino to make it into a 38k column on turn 2. That way we're also clearing our own board so we can't get damage denied. Or you can just, like, you know, if your opponent damage denies you when you are already on grade 3 and you only have 1 counterblast, you can use this to at least like push a little bit. So obviously it's a really good card, and I do like it a lot for that. And it's very important to note that, especially if you're in the locals that's like really high skill and you don't have a lot of arena players and you just want to like really, like, you know you're gonna be damage denied at all times and you have to play around that, this will be very important. And then you should probably run it at 4 or 3 because you will not be given 2 counterblasts very often, but you'll still need to make plays. players, and when you have only one CB, this is amazing. So it's a really great order. I definitely do recommend playing it at quite a few copies. Just be careful in turn 2 if you see that your opponent's going to try to damage deny you, or you know they have a tendency to do so against Orfist players, then maybe on turn 2 it's better to play the Moonlit Knight, but Eclipse Moonlight is definitely good like against the great majority of players, to be honest. So it's a really fantastic order, but that's where a lot of the complexity in the matchups kind of comes up, is with this card involved in particular. Then of course we have the other 3 copies of Orfist himself. So Orfist, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. He gets plus 5k when you have at least one set order in play, well, world order that is, and of course if your world is Abyssal Dark Knight, so if you have 2 or more in play, you can count plus 2 to make 3 Shadow Army tokens, and Shadow Army tokens are 15k beaters. So he is basically, you know, the main engine, I guess, of the deck. He lets you be able to use your entire hand to guard, but now we have a lot of cards that also convert Shadow Army tokens into other resources, and therefore we also like to, you know, use those resources that, you know, Orfist gives us for other effects, which is also really, really cool. And I like how the deck has transformed over time. And of course we need 4 copies because it is for persona writing. Getting into grade 2s, I think the must-have for a new staple is of course the Alviderd. Alviderd is just a fantastic card. You might also notice that this is indeed my favorite deck, as is evident by all the bling. But so Alviderd says, during your turn, if your world is Dark Knight, he gets plus 2k power, but if it's Abyssal Dark Knight, so if you have 2 world orders, then he has plus 5. So 12k attacker on turn 2, 15k attacker on turn 3, basically. And at the end of the battle they attack, you can retire a Shadow Army token, choose opponent's rearguard and retire it. So this one's not restricted to the front row, unlike the order, which is really nice. So if your opponent's like hiding something in the back row that they don't want you to retire with the front row pop, you pop it with Alviderd. So it's really, really cool. Also against Bruce, this lets you clean out your own back row so that Leonard can't hit it, which is super important in that matchup. And overall, this card is just fantastic. Like, it literally lets you just have a aggressive play, lets you control the board a little bit, and also clean up your own board as well to deal with certain matchups like Bruce. And so I think the card is super amazing. You don't even have to boost it with the Shadow Army token. You can boost it with something else as long as you have a Shadow Army token on the field to retire. And so therefore, I think it's very flexible, very strong card, and just definitely a 4 of, right? Even on turn 2, you can like push with it with 12, boost it with like an 8k, and it's going to be hitting for 20, asking for 15k shield. You can give it the 5k if you want from the Cubizia to make it 25. It's really good. It's honestly really, really good. I love this card, and I think it's just fantastic. Such a great addition to the deck. And so this is where we have 3 slots in the deck, because there's a lot of 4 of staples, but we have 3 slots in the deck. Also didn't really talk about, but the order, like, count, I think 8 is basically perfect. It's not too little, it's not too much. 7 you can still do, but I think 6 is too little. 9, I think you're drawing into too many bricks, and you'll have like a bunch of fake hands, basically, where like you have like a 7-card hand, but 5 of them are orders, and you don't want that, right? Set orders are once per turn, so you got to be careful. So that leaves us with 3 open slots, and people use them for different things, right? I mentioned Cubizia earlier. That's definitely like a fair play. Like, having 3 extra Cubizias means that you're able to just like have more like 15k attackers, but generally speaking, like, I'd rather like make a Shadow Army token. But of course, if you're damage denied, that's a different story, so you still want to be able to push with good numbers. Some people play the grade 3 that is like on hit to draw card, as long as it was boosted by Shadow Army token. I think that card is also pretty good. It's definitely quite nice, and I think I might be going back to it because I suddenly have more respect for it. But again, partially because my locals does have a few Bastion players, and this card isn't very good against Bastion, but at the same time there's plenty of other things being played, so I do play the 3 Estrit. So Estrit, I think, is a pretty interesting card. It lets you, at the end of each player's turn, if your world is an Abyssal Dark Knight, so if you have 2 world orders in play at least, then both you and your opponent choose one of your own rears and retire them. So for me, this is ready for like Bruce matchups and stuff. Like, you just literally want to clean out your back row, and sometimes Alviderd isn't enough, Thumberino isn't enough, and you need that one extra little bit to clean out your back row, and that's what you get. And of course, for some matchups, like Magnolia, for example, this is just really tough because they really value their resources, and so you kind of like forcing them to lose them is really big. So this is definitely like more of like a meta call, I would say. Like, these last 3 spots can be adapted to whatever you want. Cubizia if you want more beaters, this is fine if you want more retire and more like control of your own and your opponent's field, and otherwise you can run the grade 3 with the, you know, nice attacks as well if you want to. There's also, like, because the grade 2, it gives us more early rush options, especially going first, or even going second for that matter, to be honest. But it's nice to run grade 2s, that's why I don't run the grade 3 guy. But at these 3, like, this slot of 3 cards is definitely very flexible, so feel free to mess around with it, whatever you really feel like, to be honest. We move on to more staples though, as from here on out it's all very much staple. So we have 4 of the Thumberino this card is very, very important. So Thumberino is a fantastic card, right? She says when she boosts a Shadow Army token, you may have her gain 15k power until end of turn. If you do, at the end of that battle, you have to retire her, like all riggers in the same column. So her and the Shadow Army token, and then you draw a card. So it's really nice. Of course, she clears out herself and the Shadow Army token, but that is a good thing because that, you know, clears out your board against things like Bruce that want to attack into it. And also in the early game, this is super important because your opponent will try to damage deny you, right? So if, let's say, your turn 2 is Cubizia and then the set order that makes a Shadow Army token and you pass on that, your opponent will just attack into the Shadow Army token, not giving you the counterblast for Orfist. So what you want to do is, like, you want to boost with this, for example, to clear out that Shadow Army token so you don't have a front row, so your opponent is forced to attack the Vanguard or give up a drive check, right? So for that reason, this is also really important on turn 2 to, like, prevent the, like, damage denial that you might be forced into. And she's just great, right? As long as you have a Shadow Army token, she does have to boost it. She can't boost just anything. It has to be the Shadow Army token. But 38k columns, that's also the highest level of power this deck can reach. 48 on Persona Ride, which is really good. Orfist reaches 33/43, so this is really good. Like, this is the highest power we can reach with the deck, and it's fantastic. Like, it's super good for pushing damage. The power gets so high. You can also, of course, like, against certain matchups, or especially against players that don't deny you, or decks that can't afford to deny you damage, like Bar Magnus, for example, you can choose to just, like, going first, call this down in front of a Shadow Army token, or like behind a Shadow Army token, boost and not use the skill, and then she won't retire herself. But it's still a 23k column, right? So if you put a trigger on there and it's 33 and they can't guard it, it's still fine. You know, it's still a-okay. So yeah, that's kind of my stance on her. I think she's a super fantastic card, and I really can't see her getting cut anytime soon just because she's so good. Like, set 3 would have to bring something super revolutionary to take her place. But of course, no matter how much they try, they can't replace the so far best countercharger for Orfist, which is Bubble Mine. So Bubble Mine is a very simple effect. All it does is, after the battle it boosted, if you have a set order in your order zone, you put into the soul to countercharge 1. And of course, countercharging this deck is super important because it also lets us, like, you know, get back from being damage denied. It lets us kind of, like, you know, on turn 2, you can sometimes go, like, you know, Cubizia, make a token, put Bubble Mine behind it to make back that counterblast. But of course, then the Shadow Army token might get attacked into, so keep that in mind. But Bubble Mine is just great. Lets us use our costs more often. Lets us use Orfist more often. Like, the only counterblast in this deck is Orfist and the Order, basically. And so this is really important to keep your resources going and keep you alive. And then, of course, for PGs, nothing too surprising here. PGs are great, especially the booster set ones, because they allow you to PG if you have a low hand without discarding, which is really cool. Moving out to triggers, of course, nothing changes here. We play one of the Brankgate over trigger just because it doubles power and crit. This randomly wins you games, so of course you'll take that, you know. If the company gives you a way to win games faster and easier, then I mean, why not take it? Then other triggers, we are running only 3 of the new front trigger. I think it is a very good, you know, front trigger. Of course, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or higher, then he gets plus 5k shield. So it's a 20k shield front trigger. And so, yeah, every nation has these, and it is very good. I think it's still not as good as a crit, though. Crits basically still push, like, if your opponent gets overwhelmed by all the power you're throwing at them, and they just, like, randomly no guard, too early, and you hit them with, like, double crit, well, it's like, that sucks. But if you hit them with double front, yeah, it's overwhelming, but it's still just 3 damage, right? So for that reason, I think 3 is a good number, but you could bump this up to 4 if you really want to. Of course, our other triggers include 4 criticals, 4 of the booster set one, as well as 4 criticals of the start deck variant. So I like 8 crit just because, again, it's just like, crits win you games, right? It gives you extra pressure. You are a 3 attack deck, and therefore it's super important to have that extra pressure from the crits and all the big power that this deck can actually achieve. And of course, a surprise to no one, our last trigger is 4 heals. Of course, you know, heals keep you alive. Heals are, you know, pseudo countercharge, as they always have been, and for that reason, they are great. You know, we like them a lot, and we definitely want to play them as well. All right, now we're going to quickly talk about the right deck discards. Obviously, just like before, if you have too many set orders in hand, you want to discard them for the right deck. Obviously, otherwise you're just discarding them for PGs or using stuff like the Hallowing Moonlit Night to just cycle and draw and, like, use the effects and stuff. So if you have too many, definitely do that. Estrit, I think, is also good discard. It's doesn't really do much against some matchups, like especially if you're not playing against Bruce. It suddenly becomes a bit more sleeper, so you can definitely discard it for the right deck, but otherwise it's still a pretty good card. But don't discard it if it's your only other grade 2 in hand. Bubble Mine, if you have too many, is also okay. Like, we do countercharge a fair bit, but at some points, like, our field wants to be better because this is still like only a 23k attack with like if there's a Shadow Army token in front of it. So this can definitely be discarded too, and worst case scenario, just triggers. So same thing as usual, but I like to do this little segment just to give you guys a little bit of an idea. Now for the kind of like optimal board section, I want to actually spend a little bit of time to talk about the turn 2 plays as well. So oftentimes you will just go into this order and like make a Shadow Army token. Otherwise, if you're making like Hollowing Moonlit Night, you're literally going to be just like draw, swing, pass. So there's not too much to discuss there. But in here in the turn 2, like you have this Cubizia's power gain. You oftentimes want to give it to the Vanguard itself, because if it's 10, your opponent can drop a 15k shield and guard it, and that's the end of story. But if you're 15, if your opponent's 10, they have to drop 20k shield, right? But the fronts don't give 20k shield just yet. So I think giving 5k here is really important, because most times Shadow Army token will be very big, because this is the optimal kind of like lane, right? You just want to swing with this, retire them both, and draw an extra card. Alternatively, it might be something like this, so you just like get the counter charge out. So yeah, I think like generally speaking, you want to be doing stuff like this. Obviously, oh sorry, wrong order. But of course, sometimes you won't get the pieces, so you just like call a Bubble Mine, give it 5k and try to push. But in cases like that, it might be worth just like kind of like not try to swing as much. And also depends if you really want to go for this order on turn 2 as well. Once we get to turn 3 though, boards can definitely get a bit more funky like this. You know, so you have like the 33k column with Orfist, you have a nice big column of 38 with the Thumberino, and then on top of that, you can basically still swing with this to like clear out your back row Shadow Army token with that. But then of course, keep in mind that against Bruce, you'll still have this Shadow Army token. So we want to be careful about that too. Keep in mind, you don't have to call all 3 Shadow Army tokens. You can call up to 3, so you can choose to call like this. So this way you literally clean out almost everything except for the Alvidar that's sitting here. But against most matchups, it's pretty much fine to just like kind of go about it with a full field and try to overwhelm them. So definitely, you know, keep that in mind. And the optimal boards definitely change on a game per game basis, but things like this or like double Thumberino columns are really, really strong. So do make use of that as well. And now for everyone's favorite segment, we're going to do the kind of demo gameplay and see how things go in terms of a mulligan and how that impacts the first few turns. So Angel Feather will be my opponent, and they're going to be with 3, and I'll be the Nova guy with a 5. So we'll be going first, which is always good with Orfist. You have a very early power spike, so you want to be making use of that as well. So let's just quickly, I already shuffled my deck, but just give it a quick shuffle as well on screen and get into it. So going first, you definitely want to mulligan for that, because you can do some early pushing as well. So early hand, basically keep Persona Ride if you have an order, right? If you have an order, you keep it, and then you're gonna find your second one, but you always want to mulligan for an order, because you need to have 2, otherwise the whole deck falls apart, and that is very, very important. So let's see, we draw into another Persona Ride and 2 triggers, which is not too bad, I guess. Lets us defend ourselves a bit early, which is nice, I suppose. So not going to complain about that one there. So I guess that's okay. All right, well, let's get into it and just shuffle, shuffle, shuffle and run it down. So let's see how things go. All right, stand up Vanguard. We are going first, which is really, really cool. So we draw into Alvidar, which is sweet. So in this situation, I think like I want to keep Alvidar, so I'm going to just drop a crit. I think that's perfectly fine. And since we're going first, we're not going to be doing any kind of drawing. So we're going to just deck search for a order. I like to search Moonlit Night, because if I see that my opponent is playing something that can damage deny me, this might be my turn 2 play, right? I think for this, the sake of this game, we'll show off like what it looks like without being damage denied, I guess. I don't know. It really depends on your locals player level. Like if they damage deny you a lot, then it's a different story. All right, and that's usually it for the turn. We just kind of pass and then we take damage. Very cool. Bubble Mine, farewell. Hope you've had a good slumber. And then it goes back to our turn. So here we're gonna, of course, discard first. This one's kind of interesting. We can do like an interesting push with Alvidar as well, but we don't have a grade 1 to back him up. But that lets us do some pretty cheeky plays, but usually they don't have anything in play yet. So we're gonna just discard this to go into Cubizia. This might be one of those like kind of like slower push turns in terms of turn 2. So we are going to use the Eclipse Moonlight here to counterblast 1 and just make a Shadow Army token. Alright, Shin Megami Tensei token acquired. And here I want to give the power to Cubizia, as I said, because I think it's very important. I think here we don't really need to do much else. We can just kind of like swing, like 15, heal. Cool. All right, we take that, give the power to the Shadow Army token. Now, you don't have a grade 1 to back it up, so you're going to just use raw power to push through and persevere, basically. So that's fine. Next turn comes back, and I guess our opponent crits us because they're good players, so of course they're going to crit us. We lose our last Persona Ride, but that is perfectly fine. There's a bit of glare in my damage zone because I move where my lights are, so apologies for that in advance. But that's going to be it for this, and so we're going to just go back to our turn, having 2 counterblast. Very nice. So here, I think I just want to discard surplus orders. There's no reason to hold on to too many and go into Mr. Orfist as per usual. Then we're going to use the order, of course, to go into our nice little Abyssal Dark Knights, but we have to Soul Blast 1 first to draw an extra card. It's going to be a Bubble Mine, which is actually pretty good. And so here we're going to use the Orfist skill to Counterblast 2 and basically make 3 Shadow Army tokens, which is also very nice. Yeah, I'm not sure why the glare got so bad all of a sudden. I think my positioning is slightly off today as well, maybe. But that's all good, fine and dandy. So let's just say, since we're going first, usually our opponent wouldn't have that much of a board yet. So we're going to just go in with this kind of board. So this will be like a 33, and we're going to just, you know, twin, heal. Let's say it does activate power here. And PG, that's pretty good. It's actually quite fine. Then we can swing with this, which is 30, and then swing with this, which is 33. So that's pretty good. Then, of course, Bubble Mine will resolve, going to Soul and countercharging 1. So we're back to nice counterblast here. Next turn, probably going to get crit again, you know, as we do. Oh my god, they hit me again. Got a defensive. We're up at 4 damage now. And so here, I'm going to just, you know, guard, maybe even like double. Who knows how big these decks are, you know? Who knows what we're facing against? Maybe it's Leonard, maybe it's Bastion, maybe it's both. You never know. You never know. All right, so here we're going to draw. We're going to go into a strong Persona Ride. That's also very nice. We have a lot of counterblast, but we can also, like, let's say, like, they call down something pesky. We can call down an Alviderd, right? Start pushing. It still hits for good numbers. Our hand isn't too big, though, so that's something important to keep in mind. Like, don't overdo it with, like, calling stuff. Don't overcall your Shadow Army tokens. Use them efficiently. So let's just say we swing here with 43. Like, this is very huge. We get Alviderd and a front trigger, so this is turning everything into even bigger. So this is now a 50k, and this is also 50k, which is pretty insane. So let's swing with 150, then swing with another 50. Of course, still 3 attacks and all dealing 1 damage, so it's not as scary. End of battle, we're going to be able to resolve the Alviderd. I'm thinking what I want to pop. Think I'm going to try to go for a Thumbarino top deck, so I'm going to take out this one, and then hope to see a Thumbarino off the top here. And so our hand is pretty okay to deal with whatever opponent throws at us now, you know, if they still are alive somehow after that turn. So now we're at 5 damage, so we have to guard every single thing they throw at us. So I'm going to put down a PG, dropping a Bubble Mine. I want to keep my Orfist for Persona Ride, of course. And then we have, like, Big Shield, you know, Big Shield, Big Shield. Like, let's just say, you know, typical Orfist uses whole hand to guard, right? Uses whole hand to guard, survives with nothing except a bunch of Counterblast and the ability to make Shadow Army tokens, which we love a lot. Right, so draw for turn. Alviderd is okay. Top deck Thumbarino? Nope, not quite. Alright, well that's fine. In these situations, I would just keep the shield, honestly. Like, you can take away an intercept in the late game if it's really important, but otherwise, honestly, just go into the Orfist phase and CB2 to make tokens and just bash, right? We haven't really seen Thumbarino much in, well, at all in this demo game, but alas, that's how the cookie crumbles. We get a crit, very nice, and a heal, very nicer. So just like that, that's probably going to be the game. And so, yeah, the deck is still pretty straightforward, like on a very like rudimentary basis. But of course, there's a lot of like, the complexity comes from counterplay and like how your opponent tries to answer your plays. So it's very hard to show in these kind of scenarios. If you are like being damage denied, your best plays are going to be just using the Eclipse Moonlight order, as well as some of your tools like Thumbarino and Alviderd and the S-Threat and stuff like that. So make the most of that as you go around playing the game. Alright, so that is going to be it for this deck profile of Set 2 Orfist. Hope you guys found this useful. Of course, this is to give you like a first starting blueprint of the deck, but I've also been playing this deck a whole lot, so this is probably like the main one I'm sticking with competitively for this season as well. So be free to mess around with it. As I said, there's a slot of 3 that you can definitely mess around with. It's quite flexible. Everything else I think is quite fixed in this deck too. But do mess around with it. Let me know how the deck goes for you. And of course, you know, learning matchups is the very fun part of this deck as well. So of course, that's something I couldn't really teach you too much when it comes to that because it would take a really long amount of time. So good luck on the battlefield, guys. Feel free to ask any questions you have about the deck in the comments as well. I'll do my best to answer them as much as possible. And yeah, otherwise, it's going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.